All right. Welcome, everyone. Good morning to Making the Most of Manure. We're starting off this morning with hog manure. And yeah, this is supposed to be an interactive session where we learn a lot and just really get to the heart of the matter that manure, it pays, can also cost us if we do a bad job. And this is put together by the Timing Matters initiative, which is a collaboration of different commodity groups in Ontario agriculture, and we're joining together to do a better job with manure. We know that the timing and the way that we apply manure makes all the difference, and so we're trying to get better together. And it's led by Farm and Food Care, but myself, my name is Mel Limas, and I'm with OPACA, which is the newest acronym in agriculture, and we represent manure contractors in Ontario, along with the whole gamut, anywhere from planting to harvesting to soil sampling. Agriculture is changing more and more every year as this equipment gets too expensive. And we'll talk about that too, that hiring a contractor is something more farmers are doing. So I want to introduce, there's going to be a fine line between who's on our panel and who is in the audience, because we really want this to be interactive. But I just wanted to briefly introduce, Lyle, could you just give a brief introduction to yourself and Burnham Pork?
Lyle Campbell, Burnham Pork, sow farmer.
Whereabouts?
Lambton County.
Lambton County. Phil?
Phil Van Ray here in county. We have about 10,000 pigs on our farm. We also do garlic, and we have a meat store on site.
Excellent. And I don't actually see Tristan on the call. Tristan, are you here yet? Else we've got Steve Redmond, the one and only. Oh, he's you're muted, Steve. You got to get it done at least one time.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Redmond. I've done nutrient management since 1996, way before, or the first edition of NMAN. Done a lot of soil sampling too, including a bunch of nitrate sampling, trying to track nitrogen out of manure. Did some soil optics work for a while, but I love manure.
I love manure. That's great. Larry Behringer.
You're a sick man, Steve.
Sick man.
Hi, I'm Larry Behringer. My company is Pumped Environmental Services. I'm a custom manure applicator since 1996. We started with an irrigation gun, and then we switched to drag hose around the year 2000.
Excellent. And on every call, we're going to have Christine Brown.
Yeah, I'm Chris Brown, Field Crop Sustainability Specialist with OMAFRA, aka Manure Management Specialist. And like Steve, done a lot of work with manure and soil sampling, just trying to maximize the nutrient content. Excellent.
And what about the rest of you? I'd love to get to know a little bit more about who else is on the call and what type of farm you have, maybe some of the questions that you have. So if you want to pop it in the chat, just your name, where you farm, and what you're doing. And also if you have any questions like right out the gate, because I do want to make sure that all your questions are addressed over the time. Hello, Bruce. How are you doing? I'll give it just a moment. Who we've got Jeff Bannerman. Do you want to quick introduce yourself as well?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Jeff Bannerman with CropQuest. Also, like Steve, doing nutrient management plans for a long time. I've been doing them since 2000, and at the start of the whole Nutrient Management Act. Background from a dairy and beef farm, and also do NASM plans dealing with various different products, sewage biosolids, and other waste products with abattoir waste and stuff like that. So amendment additives, excellent products.
Nice. We've got Gerald from Bacon Acre Farm. Oh my goodness. Can you please introduce yourself? And where did you come up with that name? That's amazing.
if I knew
Are you
how.
there? Yeah, there you did it. Unmute. See, we're all just practicing.
Gerald Cody, Granton area, just north of London. Bacon Acre Farm. Yeah, I guess we've had that name for a few years.
I love it.
So just currently don't do our own manure, but interested in at some point maybe finding some way to efficiently apply it once the corn's up.
Perfect. Thanks. We've got Jeff and Loon from Dublin doing finishing hogs and cash crop. Rock Galluck. My goodness, how do you have the world's best name? Ridgetown, and you're using your neighbor's manure. What type of manure is it? Is it just hog, or are you using other types too?
It's finishing manure and it's sow manure.
Sow and manure and finishing. Ken, broiler, comma hog. I just read boiler hog, and I was like, and organic crops in Oxford. Yeah, I'm also really interested in organic, guys, because you rely on manure more than the rest of us even. Andy Van Niekerk here, who's a CCA and also has hogs. Awesome. It'll be a great conversation. So yeah, and put your questions in the chat as we go along. We'd like to answer them. But we wanted to start with a slide. We're here to talk about money and manure. So how does this land? 1 million gallons of finisher hog manure is $80,000 worth of nutrients in your storage. And I want to call on, I don't know if that makes your eyes go big, like mine does. Chris, do you want to just talk a little bit about how you got to that number?
Yeah, we're always trying to show how much value manure has, and we've often done it on a per 1,000-gallon basis or on an application basis. But we thought a couple of years ago, what if we looked at what manure was in the storage, and if we compared it to commercial fertilizer? Because commercial fertilizer, people don't want to pay any more than they actually have to. But when I used liquid finisher hog, I used the average from our database, looked at 2,000 finisher hogs, 1 year manure capacity. And so at capacity, we're looking at about 27 tons of urea, 15 tons of MAP, 25 tons of potash. And that's going to be different from farm to farm. But looking at current fertilizer prices, which have almost doubled in the past year, that's $80,000 worth of crop available NPK. Plus, that doesn't count the micros and the organic matter. So we've got a valuable resource, and it only goes downhill from the tank, and we're going to talk about that afterwards. But how can we maximize that? Because you've paid for these nutrients in feed, how can we maximize them from the manure?
Any comments from anyone else? We're going to dive right into, okay, the type of storage that it is also makes a difference. So I wondered if, Phil, you could just chat about the new storage that you make, how that compares with the old ones.
Yeah, so we really just filled our barn up last week here. It's a 3,200 nursery with another 3,200 finisher in the new barn, and the old barn there can hold around 3,600 total. Differences from the old barn is that instead of the lagoon, you can see it behind, we put all our storage underground, and instead of the classic 8 feet deep pit, we actually did 10 feet. So instead of the minimum 242, 45 days there's, we have more than 365 days of storage. So now we get to choose when we want to spread it instead of having the pit choose for us. We signed on, we'll be able to get all our manure out when we need it instead of in the fall and kind of get lost for the next spring. With our storage, the difference is also we used to mix up, you can see in the bottom left photo, you can see that we have to mix our lagoon outside, which is what we've always done. But with the new barn, when we pump out of our pump outs, there's going to be no mixing. So we haven't tried that out this year, but we'll see what that does in our manure samples as we continue on. And then we also went to a dry fed barn in the new barn compared to a liquid feed in the other one. In the liquid fed barn, we do a lot of we did a lot of whey feeding, which actually changed the manure up almost immediately. Some of the manure actually got like pretty instant black and was pretty staining. Then we moved to a lactose, which is a lot less angry on our concrete because whey would actually eat all of our equipment. It was amazing on how much the acid in it would tear apart concrete over 10 years, no problem.
Wow.
Now that we have lactose, it's a lot friendlier, which is pretty good. So we added with our wash water and water nipples is kind of the only water we're going to get into our new barn, but our old barn, we got the rainwater outside as well.
I'm watching this. You loser.
So we're hopefully taking the outside lagoon off site. We won't need it anymore. Might turn it into an ultimate skating rink. We're not sure yet.
Oh my goodness. I'm coming over.
Yeah.
Lyle, what about you and your storage and kind of the different components?
We're 8-foot deep pits, but they're 8 feet wider than the barn. The barn's actually built completely on posts, which is kind of odd. But so we have pump outs. There's five main rooms plus your fairing rooms, but those aren't as they're just 4-foot deep pits in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5 main rooms are, you have 2 pump outs per room, so you can pump and stir at the same time, or it's got plugs in between that you can, or slides that you can move from one to the other. I use a stir stick in the whole time I'm spreading the and yeah, so my pump doesn't have any agitation on it. It's just I have one stir stick that I put on a separate tractor and stick in there to keep everything basically at the same velocity and kind of keep all the nutrients level going across the field.
Nice. Nice. What about the rest of you guys or Larry? I don't know. Larry's seen a lot of pits, I bet, in your life. If you had a comment on how that correlates. Or Steve?
Water quality.
Yeah. Like you said before, you had one of your customers won the award for the smelliest manure. So what was that factor?
So we pump this guy out twice a year, spring and fall. And I'm not sure if it was the spring or the fall that when we went there, but the next time we pumped him out, we were about halfway through the job and we finally had a chance to chat. We don't always see our customers when we're working on their farms, just from a biosecurity standpoint. But I asked him what he was doing differently. And he asked me why I asked that question. And the odor of his manure dropped drastically. And then he told me that he had water with a high sulfur content, and he put in some kind of water purification system, and that totally changed the odor on his manure. So, and we weren't sampling at that particular farm, so I don't know what that did to his analysis. But I know another hog farmer that he's farrow to finish, that he put a water treatment in his place. And he said just the weight gain on the wiener pigs was incredible, just because of a water purification system that he put in the water the pigs are drinking. So input determines output. It's basic math.
Yep.
Mel, can I make a comment about Phil's operation?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so I've worked with Phil and his dad and his brother Dean for years, and they've always, especially Phil's dad Martin, we've been trying to value the manure out of that lagoon for neighbors for years, and it's a struggle because of the amount of water that it captures, right?
Yep.
And so we would take, or the Van Rays would take samples, at the beginning of the tank or the lagoon and at the end, and you kind of find a middle ground. But anybody that's got in Phil's new tank is going to give you, eliminating that rainwater is going to give you a much better sample and consistency, and it'll create an easier calculation on the value. The other thing I want to mention is the Van Rays have been very innovative. We did some green seeker work there years ago. They grow 20-inch corn, so that's a long story. But Phil's brother Dean was one of the first ones to use climate field view to map his drag hose. He had to find John Deere came up with the one flow rate monitor that would field view would read. And what was fascinating when I looked at those maps, and I thought, now you've got an accurate record of the application rates across the field. And if you take samples, say from that lagoon or from your tank, at the beginning and end, then you can actually calculate a little more closely across the field, because that's what some people are concerned about, is part of the field gets a higher rate, but part got a lower rate. And if you're drag lining on an angle, well, how are you going to treat that separately as a side dress? So
good point. Anyone else? Phil's got some really nice pictures of of application, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But first I wanted to, we talk input determines output. So let's have a look, and we're gonna dive into some numbers. So I'm going to share my screen again and dive into some numbers. And this is your latest sample. Was that right, Phil?
Yeah, this is one of the neighbors here that we help out with.
I don't know, Chris had a look at this just a few minutes before the call. Did you have any comments on this, or let's go to your slides, Chris?
Sure. Yeah, we collect a database of samples that we use in AgriSuite, and it gives people an idea of averages. And so if you put them together, yeah, this is in the range of the averages. If you go to the next slide, though, I'm just going to point out a couple of things that
this one, right?
No.
No,
the manure
Honeylands
one. No, the other one, the next. Oh, maybe you don't have it.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so you don't have the finisher and the farrowing barn analysis that I gave you?
Oh yeah, these.
Yeah, those. That's okay.
Sorry, I just need to mute someone.
So this is an elaborate analysis, and the reason that I get these kind of analysis is because it gives me a little bit better idea of the big picture. And as we move along, we find a lot more out about manure and some of the things that make different manure types unique. And so the thing that when we put the information in AgriSuite, and most of you know that AgriSuite is a bunch of tools, and Mel's going to talk about that at the end. But one of the tools is the organic amendment calculator, where you can put in manure analysis actual numbers, or you can use averages from the database based on either a specific dry matter range or the average of all. But when we put the numbers in, this is an analysis from A&L, and they give the phosphorus total, and then they give phosphorus as P2O5, and same with the potassium. So the AgriSuite number actually uses the total phosphorus, and then we do the calculation to come up with the phosphorus as P2O5, because in the A&L analysis they say here 10.4, but that's the full value. That's not the 80% that we assume is available over time. And same with the potassium, we assume 90% is available, so it's AgriSuite's going to give you 90% of that 10.1. Now, some of the other things that we look at, organic matter in liquid hog manure, and especially in farrowing barn manure, is very low. So is the dry matter. When you look at 1.5%, that's a lot of water. That means 98.5 is water. So it's not surprising that on an as applied basis, the organic matter is 1.6%. But one of the really important numbers that we don't test for enough, I think, and we learned this because of digestate, but I've been doing pH sampling on a lot of samples since then. And with hog manure, it's all over the map, and I haven't figured out why yet. I don't know if it's a feed ingredient or if it's something else, but the pH, when it's above 7.5, the closer it is to 8, the higher it gets over 7, we start losing ammonia if it's not incorporated or injected immediately. So if you're spring applying and you've got a pH of 7.9 or 8, chances are if it's not incorporated for a couple of days and it's nice, warm, sunny conditions, we've lost the majority of that nitrogen. And so I think it's important to test for pH just to get an idea of how do I manage it to get the most out of that nitrogen. Carbon to nitrogen ratio is another one that we look at. With liquid manures, it's almost always under 10:1, which is good. It just gives an idea that organic nitrogen component is fairly rapidly available. Sulfur is one that we ask to look at more often because sulfur in manure. Now, the thing to note with the sulfur, and Honeyland Labs did the analysis, and they told us that most of the sulfur in manure is in elemental form. So it's not the sulfate form, it's the elemental form. So similar to the organic nitrogen portion of the nitrogen, it's like a slow release. So if it's fall applied, yeah, you're going to get some the following spring. If it's spring applied and it's cold conditions, you might not see it right away. So for a wheat crop, for example, you might not see that sulfur soon enough. Conductivity is another one that's of interest. It gives an idea of salt content, like not sodium salt, but total salts. So for somebody that's applying the manure and then planting right after, that you basically want it under 10. We get some samples where that conductivity is 20 or 26 or even higher, especially with some of the food organic amendments that include food waste. And the conductivity, the total salts, it includes the ammonium, nitrogen, it includes the potassium, it includes a bunch of the different salts that not just the sodium. So those are the main ones that we look at. The micronutrients are also interesting, especially when a farmer compares theirs against what's in the database. Some of these in the database are still fairly low numbers, but if you've got a micronutrient that's way higher than the average, it's probably worth talking to the livestock nutritionist that you've got helping with and determining, is there too much of a certain micronutrient being applied? Or if it's way under, same thing. Because those micronutrients do vary from farm to farm and they vary based on ration. And so the comment that Larry made about the sulfur in the water, yeah, that's going to have an impact on the sulfur in the manure as well. And like Larry said, the odor. So that's just a really quick.
Yeah. Wow. Glad we're recording this because I'll need to listen again. I'm curious from the nutrient management consultants on the call, if you wanted to weigh in, is this kind of when you're looking at a manure test results, is this kind of jive with what your experience is? Have you been looking at this pH thing as well?
I'll comment, Mel. I never looked, I guess you learn something new every day. And so the pH is a new factor for me. And especially, I'm not working with a lot of digestate, but that makes total sense. What I try to do with farmers, like often the NPK can be a little variable or whatever, but I always show them the boron and the, where was it? The boron, the magnesium, the zinc.
Yep.
And I say, we value manure at whatever, $20 an acre, but there's another, I often say $15 an acre with all these micros. And of course, if it's sow manure, you're gonna have less, but we tend to forget that this is why corn on manured ground tends to do better. This is like an alpine, just like a liquid starter that's full of micros, and that gets undervalued.
I would agree with Steve on that.
Yep.
I never thought about like Steve never thought about the pH of the actual manure. I know that it's something that we are conscious of when we're recommending nitrogen rates on ground that is high pH or low pH. So it's something you have to take into consideration. But I never even thought about the manure being the pH of the manure having that much of an effect. But it would stand to reason. Why not? I was just looking around for my 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 own manure samples from my own farm there. So it was just going to compare them.
Yeah, the
How-
pH, it was an aha moment for us too.
Yeah.
We were doing some side-by-side field tests on a forage field at Gord Green's place, and we had been doing it with his dairy manure. And then the next year when he had his digester, the digestate was being used for the field, we said, okay, well, let's try it. And so we had the dosimeter tubes out in the field, and it was on a Saturday afternoon, and I was showing Gord, you're going to get neighbors asking what these pails with dosimeter tubes are. And so I was showing them, and we had just finished spreading the manure like an hour before maybe, and the dosimeter tube had ammonia loss showing similar to what we would see at a 2-week level in dairy manure in just 1 hour. And it was like,
Interesting.
oh my gosh, what's the reason for it? And so when we started doing the sampling, that's when we said, oh, okay, it's pH that's related to this. And we've done several samples since, and same thing. So pH is definitely something that if you've got high pH, the sooner you can incorporate the manure, the better. That was my aha moment.
Yeah.
Now that sow barn that you had the manure up on, was it an outside pit or an inside pit?
It was an outside pit. I
Yeah,
had to think for a second where it was from, but yeah, it was an outside pit.
I was gonna say, because from mine to that, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
The pretty much double.
Well, and that's where the slide that Mel has up now. Again, we were looking at the looking at different ways to handle water. And because if you look at the cost, let's say we're using 1.5 cents a gallon, and that might be low, I'm not sure, but that's what I'm using. And if I look at just keeping the rainwater out by covering the storage, and I'm using AgriSuite, the new tool, the manure storage and sizing. There's all kinds of different options you can try. So it's an apples to apples comparison. I'm not saying that this is a measured value. But if I keep the rainwater out and I look at 12 by 120, 145 foot storage, that's basically 1.3 million gallons. And if I've got basically a year's worth of storage, but then I have that same storage and keep the rainwater out, I suddenly go from 370 to 500 days of storage. And instead of a manure that's on average 5.2% because of all the water, it's suddenly a little bit higher concentration, maybe about 7%. So I've got more concentrated nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But if I look at not just the value of the nutrients in the tank, but I look at what I don't have to pay because I'm not transporting water, I'm saving about $4,000 plus just by not spreading 70 loads of water if I have a 5,000 gallon tanker. So it increases the value. Now, if I look at the fertilizer value of the full storage, this is not totally an apples to apples comparison because one is 370 days and one is 500 days, but it just shows you that keeping the water out is going to increase the value of that manure. Somebody's got a question now.
Yeah. Ken, are you there? Or did you accidentally raise your digital hand?
I'm sorry.
You did not. Now you have to say something. Has anyone, I'd be curious just from, I'll stop sharing just for a little bit. I think you get a good sense of the value of covering it and really looking at that. What does everyone else's storage look like? And has that been your experience of, I don't know, Jeff, you've worked with a lot of different types of farmers too, or anyone else? Ken, or iPhone Ken, I just see your living room. Do you want to?
I'm sorry.
Here, that's okay.
There you go.
There you are. Did you want to talk a bit about your pit and how it's all set up?
We have our hog barn is under barn storage. Our nursery barn is a combination of pit and barn.
Yep.
My biggest challenge is agitating our in barn storage. It's 8 feet deep. What do guys do in order to not gas their pigs?
Stir sticks work the best for me.
Okay.
Yeah, we have those little sulfur, or what the heck are they called? SO2O or whatever the heck it is for the gas. Little ones in the barn we walk through, and you'll get very little while I'm stirring. You don't want to stir it wide open. I mean, the back room would be roughly 65 across, like type thing, and it'd be about 160 or 100 and about 160 long. That'd be one room, and having the tractor run maybe 300 PTO,
Okay.
on a 540. Like, not, you could really run it, but if you keep it on there and just keep it all day long while you're spreading, it keeps it very well suspended.
Yeah, I would agree with Lyle on that. Mine is a raceway system, and I've had it fairly high, fairly close to the bottom of the floor at one springtime, and I just ran it slow for longer periods of time, and just never had a problem. And I usually bring the lower the curtains so that I have more air ventilation through.
What kind of an agitator were you using in your pits there?
Mine just stir stick that fits underneath the in the sump there.
Yeah, like a prop agitator.
Yes, that's.
Yeah, I find that causes an awful lot less gas at lower RPM than running a recycling circulating pump.
Yeah. I've never used one of those, but
yeah,
just because it doesn't work in my barn.
Well, we've done it in a barn when you're filling tanks and stuff and in between, and I've told the guys, don't even bother agitating, put the stir stick on the opposite side, it'll get the channels and stuff. And I unfortunately last fall I was transferring manure from one pit to another, and it's 12-foot pit, and I only had about 30 or 40 pigs left in a 200 head barn, so it wasn't a big barn anyway. But as I was pumping the manure in, the manure got to the 8-foot level, and I gassed 8 hogs out of there. I went in there, I thought the pigs were fighting or something, went in and looked around, and I was getting one pig out that I thought was getting beat up, and then I looked around, it's like, geez, there's a bunch of pigs that are squealing here. And then it just kind of aha moment, got the hell out of there. Thought, now what? So go back in, hit all the fans on. It was late fall, and I ended up losing 10 hogs altogether out of it. But it's even 4 feet from the slat surface, the gases were going up that fast from the splashing of the manure going into the pit.
In my barn has an under the floor fan situation. It's a dual ventilated barn, so I drop the temperature and then all the fans kick on, and then I suck all the gas up that way. So it's just a precaution. I don't know whether there's one time when I forgot to do that and I never had a problem, but anyway, touch wood.
Andy.
Test kits for checking for the gas.
If you go to like Ackland Rangers or whatever, you can get actual little meters.
Sorry, did you say?
Ackland Rangers.
Oh, okay.
They're a supplier for like plants and all that, but they sell it to the public and everything. And you can get the meters to go, and you can just clip them on your boot. So when you're walking around or whatever, if it gets too high, it'll alarm, but it'll digital readout of what the gas level is.
Yeah.
Because it starts like, say, at 20 parts per million or whatever, you'd start to get headaches. At 30, you'd start to feel this. At 50. And
you're not going to read it anymore.
Now, and that's also at your boot level instead of like, because everybody's like, oh, just put it on your clip, on your belt or whatever. But it's like, well, the pig's head's at my boot level, not up halfway up. And the gases are heavier and you're pulling there across. So you're not going to have the same effect up higher as you will lower. But I've done that quite a few times, walk through, and I'm fairly confident with what we do now that we don't do it every time anymore. But yeah, until you get you're confident on what you're doing, it's not a bad idea to have one.
Yeah.
Lyle, can you put that name and number in the chat?
In the chat, sure.
If you have, it'd be handy to have.
We can also send it out afterwards to everyone by email if we can.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, she'll get you what you want.
So helpful. Is there, oh, we've got another question in here, because I do want to move on to application. Or Larry, did you have something to say there?
When we're agitating an under barn tank with a nozzle on a pump, the nozzle has to be underneath the liquid level. If it comes above the liquid level, it's instant gas. And even when we're transferring from one barn to another, the gentleman that talked before, are you just dumping the manure in the pump out?
Yeah,
We actually put
that's
a
over
pipe,
the top.
we actually put a pipe on our transfer line
Down
so
to the
that
bottom.
we're transferring to the bottom of the tank when we're transferring into the barn to reduce the chance of gas.
Lesson learned.
We knew this question would be coming, Jim, because we talked about it last year, which is the foam. So you said you've got an 8-foot pit with 2 feet of foam. Anyone have a miracle solution to that? That's legal?
Can I ask a question?
Chris, yes.
So, is there digestate grains being fed? Where you've got the foaming?
Distillers
Oh,
grain.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim says yeah.
Because this is it's been an ongoing problem. There's some research that we were working on a couple of years ago with some people from the States, and of course we don't have an answer. But one of the questions was, does it, and we think it's more than one thing, but does it have something to do with the distiller grains? Because every case where there was foaming, almost every case where there was foaming, there was distiller grains in the diet or in the ration. So I don't know if that's the answer. My guess is it's part of the answer.
Is that the case for others? I'd be curious if the rest of you have that issue.
There is DDGs in the feed.
There is, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, we've used Romanson. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just wondering what other people are doing.
I've used and this is quite by accident, and I don't know whether it works all the time, but it's a dry disinfectant, Stalosan. I don't know if people have heard of that, but I just fogged the barn, and you could just hear all the bubbles go off, gassing off. And now I can't remember now how long it lasts. I actually mixed a Listigrow product in there in my tank, and that's when it started to foam on me.
Oh,
mix of the manure and the Listigrow product,
the biosolids.
The biosolids, it caused foaming. So I noticed it foaming, and then I just kind of thought, well, I'll try this, and it seemed to work.
We had foam bad enough. Foam was within about 2 feet of the pit, of the slats, and my son was washing the barn when it was empty, and he broke enough of those bubbles. He burnt his eyes, and he had to be in the hospital for 2 days for ammonia burn on the eyes.
Wow.
Oh dear. Oh goodness. Phil, this is why we talk, so that we can learn our lessons from each other. Is there anything else related to storage? Also, we want to talk about application as well.
Yes, Mel. I would like Phil to explain how they're going to pump out their new barn.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is, when you build a new barn, the future, what I always say, is sensors. It doesn't matter what happens, the future is always sensors on your car, tractors, whatever. How good your sensor is how good everything else is. So each of our rooms got humidity, temperature, airflow, temperature. We have pit temperatures as well, and you can put your sensors down in the pits to know what happens. Our pit ventilation's unique, that we wouldn't have that issue from pumping or spraying, because it is a one-way traffic for the air to leave. It doesn't actually go back into the room. It sucks through the floor into the pit, and then it leaves the barn. But what our plan is for right now is that we have multiple pump outs in our barn. So we got in the top 2 corners, and then we got it in the middle. There's also a big wall splitting our nursery and our finishing barns that has slides on it. So what we can do is actually rotate it, but ever so slowly. So we pump out the one corner, you can actually drain the nursery, and then you could actually open up the finisher to mix it as you go. And you can pick all the corners around the barn to slowly drag from, instead of just pulling from one location all the time. But really, that's all we're doing right now. So nothing, there's no air down in the pits to agitate. And because we actually can't have any air going backwards, because it would ruin how our airflow works, we actually put baffles down in our pump outs. So there actually is no air pockets. You can't even really sneak in a stir stick or anything, because there's a wall there to block for the air movement. But we're gonna shoot the boot and see what happens this year.
Good luck. Yeah. And we're moving on to application, and then we'll talk a little bit about, no, probably a lot about when the timing matters. And just because there's nitrogen in your storage does not mean that it's going to go onto the field. And that's what, but first, Phil's got some more nice slides about, sorry, I'm just going to scroll through these. About application. I know, Phil, okay, sorry, Ken, I saw your eyes go wide too, like mine. Tell us about this unit, Phil, and then Larry's going to talk about what he's doing, and Lyle as well.
So I don't remember who the guy was we bought this thing was, but he was a tinkerer. He just liked building things in his backyard, as we bought it from him many moons ago. And we bought our we bought a dragline system because what was happening was, we are, first and foremost, we're a no-till farm. So when we were doing our tankers, we were noticing that you could see the corn, you could see exactly where the tire tracks were every year. And when you had a wet spring and you had 3 weeks to get it out and also get your crops in, you really put against the wall. So we made the decision to switch to a dragline system. So we bought somebody's old system while they upgraded, and we bought this bar separate from that. And more or less, it's a 60-foot span. We got a chrome meter on it, and you'll see in the future there, we can see the maps of how it maps out. Like, just like that.
Future is here.
So that middle map there is actually the connection and the tractor skipping out. But the bottom right corner, you can see the red, yellow, and green. And you can see, perfect example, when you're turning, we speed up. So the gallons per acre go way down just because you're doing the turn. With this, because we work with our agronomists, we do test plots all the time, so we can actually do prescriptions in our field. We haven't figured out quite to do you can tell which side of the fields need more or less. You can just speed up and slow down in the tractor. It's quite easy, actually. And with our application, we can pump like 2 miles away on a single pump, which helps because we got some fields that are pretty far away for us. But we've also, every time we mess up, we just call it an experiment. So like the one year we got put in the corner it was a really wet spring. So we decided to plant the corn first and we'll spread the manure after. So that was the first time. So we had like 4-inch corn that we were drag lining over, and it was pretty cool to see the pipe get pulled over the corn and it flips right back up. So that was a good test year. But what happened is, it used to take us 3 weeks to pump out on perfect weather the tankers. And now it takes us 3 days, and it's evenly spread and we get maps. It's just been a world of difference for us to get it out, because you don't get pinned against the weather so much. You can actually pick and choose. You do miss, you can see in the bottom left photo, because there is a creek there. We obviously stay away from that with the turning, but what we can do with our tankers is you go back inside and get a little more pinpoint with the tankers, which I see a lot of, in my personal opinion, I see a lot more custom people who just did dragline. They also do tankers to get in the sneaky little spots that the dragline system is not exactly doing. But no, we love it. We've been upgrading. We've been playing with like different hose lengths and manure management of trying to get prescriptions for our fields. And we've definitely messed around with timing of doing it before and after corn. So it is possible. Don't get too distraught over 4-inch corn, but it can be done. So yeah.
Wow. And Andy, I want to hear about your in-crop application too, but Larry, tell us about your setup. You're also on dragline.
A lot has changed over the years. With the drag hose, everybody operates on a 45-degree angle in the field. And the reason, when I ask guys, why do you do that? A lot of them say, well, that's just the whole. But the reason for that is when you're operating on a 45-degree angle, every run you make in the field, the runs get shorter. And we had a lot of problem with over application on headlands due to the fact that we were doing, when you're pulling a drag hose, it's a rubber hose and it's almost like a slingshot. So the longer or the more hose you're pulling, the more tension you have on your drag hose tractor. And currently we're running a 6-inch drag hose. When we used to run a 5-inch drag hose and had a 100-horse tractor with front wheel assist on it, when we'd take the pull off the tractor at the end of the field, it would slingshot us back 5 to 6 feet. And if you were sleeping, you could almost bang your head on the windshield of the tractor. So we've taken that with the 6-inch drag hose, it even becomes worse. Turning is a lot more of a problem. So we've taken another approach to it. We don't run on a 45-degree angle anymore. The angle that we run on is determined by the layout of the field, so that we use a little unit called the hose humper. I don't see any pictures of it here, but
Oh,
what
shoot,
we can do.
sorry.
But
Was in the bottom right, the hose humper?
Right.
No. So in this photo, we've got a custom pump truck that we built on the bottom left. So we actually use a truck engine to run that vertical pit pump. We have a gearbox in the drive shaft, and we've got a variable height drive system. So we can use that one unit in anything from a 14-foot deep pit to an 8-foot deep pit. So the second picture in the kind of in the middle there, that shows us crossing a road where there's no culvert. We have a unit that we can lay on top of the road and traffic can drive over it, and we pump manure through it, and it's about equivalent to hitting a speed bump in a parking lot. Unfortunately, roads aren't level. They have a crown in the middle, so we have to narrow the road down to half the road. So obviously we only do this on selected roads. We don't do it every place that we spread. And then we'll park something there with 4-way flashers on or whatever that we can, so traffic doesn't drive over the wrong side of the road. So that's been quite a handy tool for us. I built that in 1998, and we've used it ever since. And we've actually got some jobs because we could access land with the drag hose that some of our competitors couldn't. So, and then so we use the hose humper to move the hose so we can control. If you see the triangle there, we used to run 2,500 feet on a diagonal on one setup, and we'd get about 1.5 years out of a drag hose. We'd end up ripping it to pieces, and so with the hose humper, what we can do is we can do shorter runs in the field. Instead of running corner to corner, we'll set up differently. And then the hose humper is basically just a big pulley that we can either have freewheel, or we can lock it solid, and we can push and pull and move drag hose behind the drag hose tractor while we're pumping. And so our line of pull that we're pulling in the field is a lot less. So turning around at the end of the field has become less of an issue for us. And now we actually have a pump that we can put in line and move that pump in the field under full flow, full pressure. So our record so far, we did 175 acres without shutting down.
Oh, wow.
Without having to shut down, remove hoses and all that stuff.
Yep. Wow.
The top right picture. So we use a field app when we're setting up in the field to measure the field and figure our layout of the hose. And I pulled the field app up and I thought, what the heck is that what's showing in the field? And here, so this is all done off Google Earth. And that top picture on the right was us 2 years previous when we were spreading, and that was the current Google Earth picture that they gave us when we went to set up in the field 2 years later.
That's so funny. That's me. Yeah, thanks, Larry. Any questions on dragline before we move to team tanker?
Going over top of the road, any legalities with that?
It's yeah, there's all kinds of legalities. Number one, forgiveness is a lot easier than permission.
Yeah.
This
is recorded, Larry.
when we built the unit initially, I contacted the road superintendent of the township we were in and got his input on building it. When I was challenged in another township, we only had about a 3-hour job where we were going over the road, and I talked to the road superintendent, and it was a secondary road. It was not very busy, and we compromised that he let me use it. He didn't give me permission to use it, but he didn't stop me from using it. Going through a culvert is a lot easier because when you're going over top of the road, you can, if you don't get done the job that day, you cannot leave it on the road at night. It has to come off the road. Another thing is you can never, ever interfere with the path of a school bus. So you have to make it that traffic can continue if you're going over top of the road. But when I explained to the superintendent the options that we had, that we'd come back with a bunch of big tankers and wreck his road, I did it very politely. It's all about presentation, how you present yourself.
Yeah.
And so those were the only issues. I know some townships won't even let you go through a culvert under the road. And then in our township, we've had some roads resurfaced and had culverts put in specially for putting hoses through to move manure.
Wow.
So you must be in a better township than us, because we applied to do to do that same thing. We have a convenient culvert, but we wanted a dedicated actual pipe hookup that was just for us, and we were going to pay for the whole thing, obviously. And our neighbor is a driller, so it's even more convenient. And then the town got involved, and then they said we needed to get a job and people can bid on it. And I'm like, I don't know what. And then you have counselors that don't understand anything. So it's like,
again, we're recorded, Phil.
That's fine. I'll run for counselor next year. The issue was is that like we applied for it in November, so we're ready for the spring, and they're like, oh, you don't need this permit until the spring. You don't, like, no, we need to dig it in November, so we're ready for the spring. And then just kind of got rolled over there. So we wanted to make dedicated lines for this, and they thought that people be lining up at the door to get their roads drilled. So that what one of the counselors said, I'm like, I feel there's a disconnect here with the rural Canada here. Oh, at least you got a good positive council in your town.
We had one township that said we will not put a culvert in, especially for you, because they were worried that it would affect groundwater running sources. And they specified that we had to put an underground pipe in so that we can hook our hoses up to on one side and hook up on the other side. They gave us specifications. It had to be a minimum of 5 feet underneath the road surface. So we had to start back from the road and put that pipe in. I had another customer that put in a underground pipeline, and it goes from his hog barn underneath out the road to underneath a major highway and around behind his uncle's barn. And I questioned him on the price of that. And with that one pipeline, one hydrant for us to hook our hoses up to, we can access 300 of his acres, some on one side of the creek, some on the other side. The other thing it does is it allows us to spread manure that before we couldn't do it because there were standing crops in the way of where we had to run our hose. And now with the underground pipeline, the crops can be growing and we can be pumping manure underneath it, and everything worked pretty good. I'll let you go on, Mel.
Yeah. Wow. I've converted. Just kidding. Lyle, do you want to talk about like you use the tankers, but you also get your manure very far, farther than I've heard from your barn, and work with Hodgins as well, who uses tanker system.
They're on a set of quad tanks. They're flow meter with a 8-row 30-inch VTI injector on the back. So everything's I put on is all injected, covered. If I do on corn stalks, whatever, I still doesn't do anything, make any more of a mess than I can't no-till into. So I don't have to touch the field after or anything. Just put it down, incorporate it, and plant the next crop. So I move it up to 20 miles away, one way. I have a 20,000 gallon frac tank. And then I also have, or the tanks are 10,000. So basically you can almost take 3 of his trucks per time. Takes about an hour and 10 minutes for them to do a round trip.
Wow.
If it's really good, they can do it under an hour, but if you this or that or whatever, it's about an hour and 10. So yeah, move it 20 miles away and inject everything and do it all in the tanks for the most part. I'll drag on a little bit in the spring on wheat usually. But that's about it.
Wow.
It's tanked hopefully after wheat, or if he gets the frosty mornings or frosty nights in the fall and spring, you can get through about 2 inches of frost.
Nice. Wow. Anyone else use a system like that on the call? Really? Lyle. Andy, I don't know if you're still there. I wanted to chat about you got some in-crop manure with the tank. Jake Cranbrink's, right?
Yes. Sorry, my internet's starting to barf here.
Sure. I bet you've got your cat on your lap and you just don't want to.
You caught me.
How did that go this year?
So it went well. The steering was a bit of there was the worst part of it was that we had a tanker. We used a narrow tired tanker. I think it was 7,000 gallons, I think, but I can't remember. It was basically Jake Cranbrink's tank and tractor. So I just basically was trying to get away from spring application on wet grounds just to save compaction is what my goal was. And it worked well. It was fairly close to the barn, so it wasn't that they had to go very far. It basically replaced my side dressing application of 28% is what my goal was there. And so it and I thought it went well. The field averaged 200 bushels, so it wasn't lacking in nitrogen at all. We went from anywhere from depending on the length of the field and how he was able to go back and forth and empty out at the end of the run. It went anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 gallons an acre. Probably too much at that time, but so the crop didn't lack any nitrogen at all. But the worst part was that depending on the experience of your driver, you have to it was they had to follow the road basically. They had to eye it, and so that's basically, so we were missing a bit of corn, and in some places the worst part, it beats up the headlands is what it does. So you have to get used to that. But I've done it twice now. I've had remorse the second day afterwards, but at the end of the crop season, I had no remorse. All it worked really well.
That's good.
I tried to put some cover crop seed in with it, burned the snot of it, and I didn't get any cover crop growth out of that particular practice. Don't know, did I explain it well enough?
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, I only saw and got pictures of it the day after, so I was also really sad for you, but I'm glad that it turned out.
Yeah, it was hard, the corn.
Yeah.
It burned
Yeah, no,
the
there was a lot of
leaves on, but
trampling, but
it found,
well, yeah, and doing it a little bit earlier,
yeah,
the corn gets a bit more of that bounce back. I'm sure
yeah.
Phil discovered that too, right?
So the application is basically a single disc with and dropping the liquid in after the single disc, and basically it was enough to let the manure seep in there. Over an hour and a half, it was basically gone. But
Wow.
but other than that, it was yeah, it was a put on top essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, wish I'd got pictures. We didn't know you were going to be on the call. So we're going to.
When did I register?
I know.
I should have. I should have had these ready. Sorry.
We're moving on because I mean that's a good segue. Is how much nitrogen, like just because it's in your tank, in your pit, doesn't mean that it makes it to the field, but how you put it on and when you put it on really matters. So, Chris, we've got two slides to talk really about this. I did your Chris's calculations at 4,000 gallons with different types of manure, and then the second at the bottom is with 3,000 gallons of finisher manure. Chris, did you want to talk to this, or do you want to move to your?
No, this one's easier. You can skip the next one.
Oh, okay. Well, these are realistic numbers. Like this is the actual application rates on average that I think guys are using. Maybe a bit low, but yeah.
And again, this is using AgriSuite for comparisons, and that's one of the things that it does nicely because it lets you see, okay, what apples to apples, what is the difference? But this is where farming takes a compromise, and so I'm not going to say that we should all be applying in spring or we should all be applying in fall, because that's going to vary based on every specific farm. But there is a trade-off when we apply manure in the fall and have that nitrogen maybe not all there in the spring. There's also a consequence in the fall where if we can apply with cover crops, we get more biomass, we get better soil structure. We might not see all that nitrogen that's in the cover crop there again for the corn crop. And so this just gives an apples to apples comparison with 3,000 gallons of finisher manure on what is the potential nitrogen there, what is that value, and when fertilizer prices are as high as they are, then that's a little bit eye-opening. And what I don't have here is injected in crop, but that's going to be the maximum value.
Yeah. Does that information exist, or you're still working on that at OMAFRA?
There's been a lot of research farm trials done looking at how if I put manure on my cover crop, how much of that nitrogen from that cover crop is going to be there the following spring. And what the research has shown, and Bill Dean's probably done the best research on this, is that if you've got red clover, that red clover nitrogen comes available for the corn crop when that corn crop needs it the most. The trouble with oilseed radish is that it releases its nitrogen ahead of when the corn needs most of it. And so there's just not enough there for the corn crop to use. And then the oats, if it's gone to head, or cereal rye, if it's gone to head, or any of the high cellulose type cover crops, yeah, the nitrogen's there, but it doesn't become available until after the corn crop needs it. So maybe in August or September. So it's hard to give a nitrogen credit. We could still give the manure credit, obviously, but the cover crop itself it's feeding the microorganisms, it's helping with the nutrient cycling, but I can't give you an actual number of what it's giving.
Yeah. Yeah.
That value on fertilizer, what year was that?
That's this year's numbers, or
Okay.
November's numbers.
Yeah, 2 months ago. So
I was using $1.23 per pound of nitrogen, $1.07 for phosphorus, and 83 cents for potash.
Mhm.
That was my November numbers. I don't know if they've gone up since then. My guess is maybe.
Have they, Lyle?
A little bit, not
Not too.
drastically compared to what they were jumping, but yeah, they've kind of plateaued.
That's good.
And note that again, these are highlighted because that's not exactly what those are the pit numbers, right? And when I say that it's going to be it's that much dollars later, that just means in 2 to 4 years. That's kind of the, I don't know, residual
Yeah.
nitrogen and phosphorus, right, Chris?
Yeah, the way that we value
Here, I'll
the
move to the next
phosphorus-
slide because it's set out a bit better there. Maybe.
Okay, yeah. So if you look at the left-hand side, it looks at the nitrogen. The light blue is fall applied, the darker blue is spring applied, the yellow is the phosphorus, and at the 80% value of phosphorus, and the green is the potash. And so these are available nutrients, sow, weaner, finisher, based on our database. You can see the dotted line is the NPK value from spring applied, the solid is the fall applied, and that dark blue line at the bottom is the half of the phosphorus and the organic nitrogen credit over time. And then that dotted blue line, that's the cost of application. So on the right-hand side, you've got value. On the left-hand side, you've got pounds per 1,000 gallons, which is the bars. So it's showing that finisher manure obviously is the most nutrient rich. It's also showing the difference between the dotted line and the solid line for red, the difference in value from fall versus spring applied. But again, it really comes down, and the phosphorus and the potash levels don't change from fall to spring. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, and it really does depend on each farm is a little bit different, but it's just, these are database averages.
Yep. And we don't really have the value for organic matter, right? Like we just say it's priceless.
Well, it's organic matter is a funny thing because we all want it. We all want to improve our soil organic levels, organic matter levels. If you've got a dairy farm where you've already got 5, 6, 7% because you've got forages and manure, you're not going to put as much of a value on that organic matter than if you're a vegetable farmer that needs the organic matter because you're on sand or there's hardly any there. So it's hard to put a number on it. If somebody has a value, I'd love to hear it.
Anyone?
Sure. I used to always say at least like give it $10 an acre or $20 an acre. You got to give it something.
Yeah.
So, Andy, you want to comment?
No, I don't have anything further to add to yours,
No.
Steve. I think you have to add something, but yeah.
What about Steve? I don't know if and Chris or anyone else want to talk about when corn actually needs the nitrogen and how that lines up with manure in the system.
Sure. I'll start because I was part of Middlesex crop for a lot of years, still am. And Peter Johnson used to say the corn plant, I think it was Peter, the corn plant needs 30 pounds of N to get to 3 or 4 leaf, right? And a lot of guys are putting that in their starter or whatever. So that gets you to 4 or 5 leaf. And then if you've got manure, so if you've got 50 or 60 out of your manure, that's going to allow you to get to the that V12 stage. And all the work we did with Green Seeker, boy, you put on half, make sure the guy with manure or fertilizer put on half the N up front, get to the V12, and you put on the other half just before the corn has that rapid uptake. So I believe in the science, and this uptake curve is real. You just have to value the N in your manure. And a lot of guys would do, so when we were doing Green Seeker, or even guys side dressing, if they didn't believe the numbers, they would leave like 12 rows. So they'd put their 50 or 75 or 100 pounds of side dress on. And I convinced them to leave 12 rows. And I remember these 2 older guys, they thought I was crazy. So they left 12 rows thinking that at harvest, they were going to see this yellow corn. And they didn't say anything to me. Then the next year they did it again. And then the sun, they started to get, I was visiting, they got kind of grumpy with me. I said, what's going on? And they said, well, you just proved to us the fertilizer dealers who said manure fertilizer, nutrients out of manure is not consistent. They've been taking money from us for like 25, 30 years. That wasn't necessary. I'll shut up. That's going to be recorded, but it's true. And
mic drop, Steve. Yes.
Well, and the other thing that Steve was talking about earlier when we were looking at what we were going to say about some of these slides is the manure credit. And it's not as big with hog manure because so much of the nitrogen is in ammonium form. But the in poultry manure or in solid manures where most of it's in organic form, if you're putting 10 tons or 20 tons per acre on every year, you've got a pretty big nitrogen credit from year to year. So that's part of that nitrogen release, that cycling of the nutrients. But the other thing in that slide that I think is important, and if you can put it back up for a second, Mel.
Oh, shoot. Fine.
Sorry.
Yes. Anything for you, Chris?
So you notice the big jump from V6 to R1. And that's basically a 30-day period, 40-day period, maybe. So if we put manure nitrogen on, and if that nitrogen has a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, and so this is maybe more of an issue for dairy manure than pig manure, but if we're putting on, let's say dairy manure, just for an example, and we get most of that nitrogen, but it's not all there before the R1 part of the corn. So like when the corn needs that nitrogen from the manure needs to be available. And there's years where we get bad weather in the spring and the microorganisms are slow to start working, and we don't get that release of nitrogen in that period of time. So I think it's important that we look at what is the credit, what is the organic matter levels for cycling, but also is the manure we're applying, even though NMAN or AgriSuite or whatever says that I've got 100 pounds or 150 pounds that I've applied, is all of that nitrogen getting to that corn plant from that V6 to R1 stage when that crop really needs a lot of nitrogen? And I'd be interesting to hear comments from custom applicators or farmers that think that they've been short a little bit.
Chris, I'll just say something where I was proven wrong was compaction issues where the roots can't get to the end. That makes sense.
That's an excellent point.
That's actually, Chris, that's my point about when I was in my customers. That's the reason why I've been trying to push this in-crop manure application, because it's reduces compaction completely there, particularly in in clear soils. Sandy soils is not so much, but it's that's I think we applied right at the V6 actually is what we applied. V6 V actually. So we were in that window that Chris was describing. Basically, I like to wait until they can't get through the crop anymore because of height.
Well, maybe that's the next thing we'll work on. Or put it on a wish list. Andy,
with respect to.
Sorry, Andy, you're breaking up, so I'm wondering if you could put it in the chat. Just we're having a hard time hearing you, or if you could call in. I'm curious. Like we've just got not even 10 minutes left, probably. We've kind of went through our numbers and what we wanted to communicate. But for the rest of you, like, is there some questions that you have, or I'm curious, what you might be doing differently now that fertilizer prices are so high? If that's like immediately going to be changing your management this year. Thanks, Bruce. Timing Matters Twitter account. I'll put that in the next slide. What do you guys think? Lyle or Phil? What are you doing for fertilizer? You're here to be on the hot seat.
I don't think we're gonna change anything.
No.
At all, really. I know a lot of the people kind of we're gonna do more of a spring because we can wait now than ever. So this is like I think our first time we actually didn't really spread it all in the fall because we had an extra like what did we calculate? 4 million gallons extra
Yeah.
storage. So we get to pick and choose now. So we're not doing much of different.
Yeah. Well, it was a good fall to have storage.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah. Okay. Andy's comment was, oh, the cost of application in crop was roughly twice that of the drag hose, and you used a tanker. Yeah.
The thing for the in crop, I've looked into it actually.
Yeah.
Is me and Cadman, we figured out how to make a 3-inch drag line and attach it to dot.
Ooh, go
And
on.
the reason is that I want to put it possibly on dot is the ground clearance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
For those that don't know who's Dot.
Well, I think everybody knows what dot is, but
Okay.
yes.
It's an autonomous, thingamabadoo. Like, it's not a tractor. It's a, anyways, continue. So what do you think? How close are you?
Oh, it's pretty close. It's to see where they go with dot to begin with.
Right.
And to see where the pricing is on dot. It actually, so Cadman's made a few different larger scale reels for going up and down fields. We actually were looking at one, I was just seeing if I could actually find it. I believe it wasn't quite the full length of a long 100 though. We were a little bit scared of if it went the full length of long 100 was 3,000 something feet or whatever, almost 4,000 feet, I think it was. We'd be too much for it to pull. And we didn't want the reel being on it because that's just too much weight on there. So it's a reel on the front that will run down, turn, and then come back up. But the reel has to be at the front. So we looked at it a little bit, and actually it's not that bad if you put a tractor on it instead of running a motor and everything else. I think we were around, heck was it? It wasn't huge gallons an hour though. I was just trying to see if I could find where me and him were talking about. Give me a couple minutes, but yeah, so there is some
put you on hold
of doing more than just, or making it cheaper to go in crop and be able to do it, say 2 applications or 3 applications. And the only reason that was with dot was pretty much is the height. Yeah. Because you have like 5 feet of ground clearance underneath them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can go in at any time of day and do all that.
Oh, that's so neat. Well, let us know how you make out. Yeah. Anything else, or any last kind of words I wanted to?
There was a question in the chat, Mel.
Oh yeah, that's right. iPhone Ken. Question for dragline on wheat. What's the best time for maximum nitrogen efficiency? Anyone have some thoughts?
We've done studies. And if weather wasn't an issue, then in most cases, just before the wheat starts elongating is when it gets the best nutrient utilization. But that's different for, like, that's with pig manure. With dairy manure and with even with poultry manure, although dairy manure most, again, because the carbon to nitrogen ratio of that manure is higher, the availability is a little bit slower. And when we say in AgriSuite that you've got X number, let's say 100 pounds, just to give a number, available, that's available for a corn crop. Wheat needs the nitrogen a month earlier. And when soil conditions are wetter and microorganisms are less active. So with dairy manure, it was important that we put about half of the nitrogen from manure on and the rest from commercial fertilizer. Pig manure was the best because so high portion is in the ammonium form.
Russ, didn't you used to say put your manure on, because we all agree in that split application, but you can put it on frozen ground. Isn't that the best time? Just to get it out early. No, but I don't. I know.
I mean,
like wait till the definition of winter spreading is over.
So
Right.
that's if that's the practical answer. Because the conditions are, if you've got a rainy season when it's going into elongation, then you risk not getting any nitrogen on. From a practical, not doing a compaction issue, the days where you've got frozen conditions in the evening and it thaws during the day, that's the most practical time to put it on. The caveat there is if you're on hilly ground, it's probably not a good idea because if you get a rainstorm, it's probably not going to be there.
Yeah.
So those are the trade-offs.
Yeah, and I would say with liquid manure in the spring, when you've got wheat there and you've got, most of it's no-tillage, you got soybean stubble there. If you keep your rates down, because we're only looking for half the end, you're not going to get runoff. Like you said, if it's a hilly field, but I've seen guys do it in late February, early March, when they know the conditions are perfect, there's no snow, and you got that nice frost that'll carry the drag hose tractor. And I would challenge any person that might work for another government agency other than Chris there's no environmental effect under those conditions. Now, if spreading now, yes, but I'll shut up.
I just looked it up. It was 280 gallons at 200 PSI at 2,500 feet long.
Okay.
For manure, so 280 gallons a minute.
Yep.
I think if we went to 3 1/4, it was like 350 gallons a minute, same PSI. So not massive amounts a day, but if you're only drag line on 3,000 gallons or something, you're still.
Well, yeah, and if it's not taking up your time because Dot's just whipping around the field without you, that'll be pretty neat. I don't know. I'm also wondering if we can have some sort of a hovercraft thing that like I'm looking at Star Wars technology for how to limit compaction as well.
Yeah. So every 10 minutes, that's 3,000 gallons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of a tiny thing. So, I mean, that's compared to a big drag line, you're going to do that per minute. But for a small little drag line that you can keep it consistently, as long as you have enough storage capacity or off farm, because I'm looking at something that's smaller too, is then you can easily keep up to it with trucks.
Yeah. Love it. That's so neat. So we've got to close it, sadly. But wanted to let you know that all this like information and the dollars and cents and the pounds and all of that is all available and in AgriSuite. I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to chat really quick, but like this is where you would go, the website that you would go to, and like all of these are things that are available free to us to play with. Pop in your details and you can like see for yourself with your own manure. It's not putting nutrient management consultants out of a job. I think we would all agree that this is better to wrap our heads around for our own operation. Chris, any last thoughts?
Yeah, just since last year, the manure storage and sizing is new. So, and the tool that I think is probably most valuable is the field management, where you can see, okay, what are the nutrients coming in during a rotation? What are the nutrients going out using crop removal? And am I maintaining or increasing or decreasing the fertility in my field? And if you're low, that's increasing is good, but if you're high, you don't want to do that. So this is just, it's a tool, but it's we've tried to make it easier for people to use. And we'd love comments if people have ways to make it better.
Yeah. And Chris also does like helping people. So maybe like we could, she's very good at helping people. Maybe we could have like little sessions where we get training on it, but honestly, just like bomb around on it on your own. You can't wreck anything. No one's like keeping track, right, of what you enter. So okay, it's all anonymous.
Manure has no access to anything.
Okay.
Unless somebody shares it with us, we don't have any of it.
Excellent. Well, to close it out, I've got a poll. I'm gonna. Oh, hold on. Did I have the poll this whole time? Just a second.
No.
It's up now.
You can see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so if some of you might not have the latest version of Zoom, if you go to bit.ly slash most of hog manure. I'll pop it in the chat here. We would
Actually,
love your, what's that?
You can't, I can't,
Oh, because you're host. You're host. You
Oh,
can't
okay.
fill it out anyways. I'll pop it in this. I'll pop it in the chat. New. We would really love just your feedback, not only on this session, but also like what you're doing, just so that we could get a better sense of, you know, what are the needs that we have to improve manure timing and rates and all that. So this is, if you can't see the Zoom link, right, the poll right now, then you can go to this bit.ly thing. Anyways, I'll stop recording. At this point, I just want to thank everyone, especially that Phil and Larry and Lyle and Steve that were in the hot seat, as well as Chris Brown. I'll stop recording so that we can start swearing, essentially.